I think we'll just wait 2-3 more minutes. There are still some spaces at the front as well, so if you want to come close, we'll make an intimate session. Okay, I think we can probably get started. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my utmost pleasure to welcome you today to this session, where we'll be looking at answering the question, is transport on track for the circular economy? My name is Matteo Craglia. I'm an analyst at the International Transport Forum, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator today to help guide our discussions in how we explore how the principles of the circular economy can help revolutionize the way that we perceive, operate, and innovate within the transportation industry. So, the principles of the circular economy include reducing waste where possible, reducing materials and energy use, and maximizing the lifespan of products, designing products to be repurposed as their end of life. However, we also take a broad perspective to circular economy and sustainability, is that more broadly, circular economy principles also include shifting patterns of production and consumption to more sustainable forms of energy and materials. And these aims can be greatly accelerated by improving resource efficiency and shifting to more sustainable modes of transport. However, the transportation sector today is still far from achieving its circularity potential. The transport sector today still consumes a very large number of resources. It accounts for 2/3 of global oil consumption, 13% of global steel consumption, and is expected to account for approximately 80% of future battery consumption. So, to explore the ways of improving the circularity of the transport sector, we're incredibly lucky to have an exceptional group of thought leaders and industry pioneers on our panel today, who bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise, and also diverse perspectives to this discussion. So I'm very pleased to be able to introduce our speakers. If you could please warmly welcome them as they enter the stage. Firstly, we have Giorgio Travaini, who is Executive Director ad interim of the EU Rail Joint Undertaking and has been responsible for the 1.2 billion euro European Rail Research and Innovation Integrated Programme since 2021. Thank you very much. We next have Nicolas Beaumont, who is Senior Vice President for Sustainable Development and Impact at Michelin. Nicolas has nearly 30 years of experience within the Michelin Group and has held diverse positions, including setting up Michelin operations in India. Please welcome Nicolas. We next have Anna Mascolo, who is Executive Vice President for Low Carbon Product and Sector at Shell, where she leads Shell's Emerging Energy Solutions division, which brings together Shell's hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, nature-based solutions, and ventures businesses. And she was previously president of Shell Aviation, where she launched the sustainable fuels offering. Our fourth speaker is Rana Adib. She is Executive Director of REN21, the Renewable Energy Policy Network for the 21st Century. She is also the chair of SLOCAT, an international multi-stakeholder partnership enabling knowledge and action for sustainable low-carbon transport. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Jean-Baptiste Butcher, who is Sustainability, External Affairs and R&D Partnerships Director at Valeo, a leading automotive Tier 1 supplier. In his current position, he is in charge of building and deploying Valeo's sustainability strategy and helping Valeo to build relationships and partnerships with public stakeholders and R&D ecosystems. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that warm welcome. Throughout our discussion today, we will explore the ways in which circular economy principles can drive innovation, enhance resource efficiency, and create new economic opportunities for the transport sector. In addition, we'll delve into the importance of policy, collaborative partnerships, and how technological advancements can help facilitate the transition to the circular transport system. At the end of the session, we'll hopefully have 10 to 15 minutes also for questions from you, from the audience, for our panel. So I'd highly encourage you, if you think of any thought-provoking questions throughout the session, make sure you make a mental note for them to be able to ask them at the end of the session to our distinguished guests. So thank you for joining me here. Firstly, our first topic is thinking about how circular economy principles can be successfully applied to transport and supply chains within each of your industries, within each of your companies. So turning first to you, Nicolas, what does Michelin consider as the core principles of the circular economy, and how is it aiming to embed them within the business?
So thank you, Matteo, for this question. I think for Michelin and for many companies in the world, the basics of circular economy is avoid. Because if you are not using some materials, you will not have to reuse or recycle them. So for me, the first principle is avoid, and that's why for transport, having more people in one car, having lighter cars, etc., is the way to go, because then you make circular economy much easier. Then it's reduce the use of material, reduce the weight of tires, reduce the weight of vehicles, reduce the amount of oil that is needed to make the vehicle move, reduce. Then there's reusing, recycling, and renew. These are the principles that can be used for the transport industry. To do that, to support this principle, eco-design is key. Means if you don't design your product and services, your tires, whatever, including this idea of circular economy, then if you apply it in the end, you destroy value and you do not create value. And that's why sustainability is the equilibrium between value created for people, for the planet, and the economical value that go hand in hand. Other principle, life cycle analysis, very, very, very important, because you may decide to do something which in reality is not good. You know, recycled paper at one stage, people didn't know whether it was better or worse than not recycled paper. So life cycle analysis is important. And the last point I wanted to make is that for the transport industry, circular economy cannot be completely closed loop. When people think about circular economy, they think about the glass industry where you have your bottle, you give it back, and then it redoes the bottle infinitely. So first, it's not infinite because you lose some of the matter, so you need to have some new one. And in the case of transport, the idea that you could make a tire entirely out of an old tire or a vehicle completely out of an old vehicle doesn't make sense. And so you need to work with other industries, because when you are in this open loop strategy, you need to find feedstock from other industries, and the other industries are also interested by what you produce. So it means that circular economy is ecosystemic by essence, and transport being one of the most ecosystemic domain, it becomes extremely complicated.
Thank you for those. I think definitely that we're already touching on one subject is this industrial collaboration within industries as well to help promote circular economy principles. Jean-Baptiste, as a leading automotive supplier, how does Valeo view promoting circular economy within the company as well, and also as part of the wider business?
Yes. So hello. Thank you for the question. So. We're very close to Michelin. I think it's a question of wording, but at the end of the day, it's very similar being an industrial player as well. So just maybe for Just want to start with that for those who don't know Valeo. So Valeo is an automotive tier 1 supplier. We're mainly producing electric motors and automated driving systems, so software and hardware. So lots of electronics. And this is also one big transformation of our sector. And it is also one of the big reasons why circularity now is becoming, is at the tipping point, and we need to accelerate there. So for me, before going to circularity, just starting with decarbonization, because that's where everything starts in our sector. So now that the Commission in Europe has given a clear target for 2035, which is a strategy that we have anticipated because, well, electrification is something that we have started in 2009, so more than 13 years ago today. And when you say that, you say, well, we will go to EVs, we will go to electrification, we will consume more materials at the end of the day, so we need to create actually the zero carbon car, if you want to make it simple. So you need to go to zero carbon beyond just the use phase, and for that you need to tackle production, materials, and end of life. And then here you come. You're coming to circularity, and really to achieve that that ambition to be zero carbon, not just in the use phase, which is something that we will achieve by 2035, at least for the new vehicles. We need to embark circularity. So what we have done at Valeo is that we've decided to accelerate in that domain, and we have structured that in 4 big pillars. With an overarching topic, which is indeed very similar to Michelin, it's really measuring and understanding where you go. So the notion of life cycle analysis is really getting much more important today. So a few years ago, we were speaking about product carbon footprint, so everything was related to CO2. Now this is really multi-criteria, and we're also looking at how much water we will consume, how much resources we will consume. So LCA is really the starting global overarching pillar. Then we have what we call the 4 R's today. So we have robust design, remanufacturing, repair, and recycle. And everything is, again, related to the way you manage resources there, and the way we create products that will long last and that will be robust in time. So, and well, that's the way we are structuring that. This is a global transversal program within Valeo today. Well, this strategy was really laid down 2 years ago, but we're doing remanufacturing since more than 30 years. So remanufacturing, just for those who are not familiar with that, is something similar that you have in the tire industry as well, as you're using an old part and you're actually repairing that part. But it's more than just repairing it, because you're putting it in an industrial process and you're guaranteeing at the end of the day the quality and the reliability of the products. And it seems basic, but when it comes to an electronic product, for example, if you just repair it in, I would say, not in an industrial process and with all the quality checks that you have in our industry, you cannot really guarantee that this product will last, and there is a notion of safety as well. So the reason why the industry created that word of remanufacturing, but which is really for us the core of what circularity in terms of products will be. It's the fact of having really products that is repaired, but even repaired, I mean, you will keep that product 5 or 10 years, and that product will be safe and reliable over time. And that's really something important for our industry, because at the end of the day, we're putting car on the road with people inside, so there is a big notion of safety of the products. And we're today putting 1 million of remanufactured parts on the market every year, and we want to double that number of parts to 2 million in the years to come. So we're really willing to accelerate. And if I may a little bit anticipate your question about industry collaboration, if I make it simple, in our industry and for Valeo, I mean, we're ready to accelerate in circularity. Everything is in there. Eco-design is something that we're doing since years. Tracking the materials is something that we do. Integrating more recycled materials is something that we know. So we're indeed making more R&D now to get higher recycle rates. But that's something we know to do. We have the bricks internally to do it. Where today we're lacking the capacity to accelerate, it's because the ecosystem around us is not today mature to go there. And here I'm speaking about the recycling industry. I'm speaking about the way also we are selling cars at the end of the day. So we're in the middle of the chain. We're chain of supply. We're not a car manufacturer. And all that needs to be aligned in relationship with the public and the private sector. But this is something we discuss later on. So, but well, in a nutshell, we can accelerate. We're ready for that. But there is really the need to go for collaborations.
Thank you very much for those insights. It really sounds that circularity is already well embedded into Valeo's way of thinking. I really liked your point also about it's important to think about the whole life cycle approach, which is also something that Nicolas touched on, both the production and the end use, but also, I guess, upstream as well, and potentially also then into the fuel side as well. So touching over to you then Anna, how does Shell, as I guess one of the major fuel producers, see circular economy within its business, and what are the biggest opportunities for transport? And I guess also how is then Shell changing to take advantage of this as part of that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. The moment you start talking about fuels, we come in immediately, and great to be here with everybody. So let me say that circularity and decarbonization, they are very well embedded in our, what we call powering strategy, to be a net zero energy company by 2050, to be decarbonizing our own assets by 2030 by 50%. So, and circularity and decarbonization come together in the, what we call the decarbonization and respecting nature's pillars of our strategy. Now, what role do we see playing in circularity? I think we see it really in three areas. And I start from the most obvious one, which is the fuel side. So on the fuel side, we look at deploying biofuels, supporting biofuel production, using biofuel in our own networks and with our customers. And that's at a global scale. And I picked three examples, one by region. In Brazil, well, with our joint venture with Raízen, joint venture with Cosan, we are one of the biggest ethanol producers from sugar canes. We also look at producing ethanol from waste, from residues on sugar canes. Then if I move to Europe, and I pick another example, we have just invested in the acquisition of Nature Energy. It's a renewable natural gas producer, again, looking at bringing this type of fuels in our networks and supporting our customers. And then if I look at Asia, we have invested in a company called Eco Oils. They actually use waste oils, which then feed into our refining processes in the Netherlands and eventually feed the transport industry. So we've got the fuel side component, and we are developing that. There are other two elements maybe less known to the public. One is that we actually lock carbon when we produce bitumen and asphalt, either through recycled plastics or locking carbon that is being recycled.
That's for roads, right?
For roads, yeah, exactly. So there is a way also using the circular economy in our products. In this case, we pave the road for the transport sector. And last but not least, in our mobility, in our lubricants businesses, we look at recycled bottles, reducing waste in our retail side that you see when you fuel your cars. And this is, part of reducing waste in general. So you have these three elements. The last thing I want to mention, which is how do we work with our customers, which is, part of making sure that we can, of course, push decarbonization products, but we need customers to pull on the other side. So we are organizing sectors. I used to lead the aviation sectors, and the hard-to-abate sectors are always the most difficult: commercial road transport, shipping. These are sectors where demand and supply come together, and maybe the angle that I want to bring to this table is policy becomes really a key enabler to making supply and demand work, and having the right policy at the table is really, really important, and we can go into that in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I agree. Policy, I think we'll touch on in a second, is maybe one of the key parts that can help drive some of this more broadly. But also, as you're mentioning, using waste streams to then recreate fuels, that's, I guess, is quite a circular way of producing these fuels. but then also, I guess, is transitioning away from fossil fuels. And Rana, what do you see as then concrete actions that can be taken by the transport sector to decrease its dependency on fossil fuels and improve the circularity of the sector as well?
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe before coming to your question, I think what is interesting is when we think about, all probably in the room, circular economy, we think about the material part. But if you enlarge basically the first principle to avoiding basically the use of material and reducing pollution, this is where there is directly an entry point for renewable energy, because here we're not speaking about a finite resource to produce energy and fuels, but an infinite resource to produce energy and fuels. So to a certain extent, renewable energy is actually a circular economy per se, or a circular energy per se. Now, admittedly, and I think this is where there are lots of debates about biomass, for instance, or waste streams, etc., to what extent this is really circular and infinite. With climate change, we also see that there's pressure, for instance, on hydropower. So there are also discussions happening here in the renewable energy sector and in the energy sector. Now, if we enlarge this principle, what can the sector do, the transport sector? I really think that it's important to just remind a couple of numbers here. The transport sector is responsible for 30% of the total final energy consumption. It is a sector that has the highest growth, 2% annually, but it's the sector that has the lowest share of renewable energy, 4.1%. And this has not increased a lot. We clearly see, and I think in the decarbonization transport channel, we clearly saw that things are moving. A couple of years ago, renewable energy did not even appear basically in the program of ITF. So I think there is things happening. And we also see that the electrification basically of the sector is leading to this, the decarbonization is leading to this, and there is clearly the need to have cross-sectoral strategies. Now, even if we take the electrification, the transport sector is still, compared to the other sectors, namely building, industry, and agriculture, the sector that has the lowest electrification rate, 1.4%. And I think that is something which for me is already one of the indications. The technologies exist. We know how to do it. So when we're speaking about road transportation, it is obviously walking and cycling. It is obviously about developing public transportation. It is obviously about moving to electrified road transportation. And it is obviously moving away from fossil fuel to renewable energy. And I think that's something where the current energy crisis clearly also shows another opportunity. It's not only an opportunity in terms of pollution, it's not only an opportunity in terms of decarbonization, it is an economic opportunity, and it's also an opportunity in terms of building up a resilience of the fuels. Because the decentralized nature of renewables will allow to ensure basically the energy security. And I think that's something to really take into account in the transport sector. Now, let me broaden this again, because I think, and we hear it here, the players in transport are obviously not only the transport operators, but there is a massive industry behind it. And I think that is something where we also see in parallel lots of developments happening today that did not happen 3-4 years ago in the same way, on shifting basically away from fossil fuel to renewable energy. And we also see technology innovation happening here. An electrification of the industry sector, so in the production part, increased use of renewable energy, the increased use where we see that energy consumers become independent power producers, and what needs to happen to accelerate, I think, is a change of regulations across the different energy sectors, but also the energy supply sectors. So I'll pause here because I think we can speak about challenges later, right?
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. As you were saying, moving, I guess, from traditional, conventional fuels, moving to different types of fuels is also helping to, as part of that circular economy. If I'm not mistaken, one of the transport modes with the highest share of electrification is the rail sector. So, Giorgio, in your role leading the EU rail joint undertaking, what role do you see rail making in promoting the circular economy in transport?
Thank you, Matteo. Hello, everyone. So I was thinking, actually, you called me first on the stage. I am the last speaking. There may be a role in it in the sense that maybe rail has to do a lot on circular economy. And if I take it from a macro perspective, I think it is correct. Why? Because, in the rail sector, at the end, is using solutions that are long-lasting. So we have trains that last 40 years. We have infrastructures that last 100 years. So one could say, okay, not a lot needs to be done. But actually, this is wrong, of course. And on the contrary, the rail sector has a lot to offer and to bring to the circular economy. But we need to tackle it. So at the moment in Europe's rail, we are handling it for the first time altogether. Why? Because in Europe's rail is a public-private partnership between the European Union and the entire rail sector. And when I'm speaking the entire rail sector, I mean the suppliers, the operators, research entities, all working together in a research and innovation program. You said it before, 1.2 billion, so it's big. And we're there really to find solutions in order to push this circular economy through tools, methodologies, and also leading, well, at the end we will discuss afterwards, but also leading to standards and regulation that I think can be applied cross-sector. And this is, I think, what Europe's rail can offer, because we will tackle the circular economy not only from a perspective, well, like it was said rightly before, supply chain and all those different aspects of products, production, recirculation, etc. But looking at it from, the vehicle perspective, from the infrastructure perspectives, and from the buildings perspective. So actually it's not only a cooperation only between transport, it should also be enlarged. So to see how we can also reuse, as it was said before in the principles, materials that maybe cannot simply reuse in one of those categories I have mentioned. For example, I don't know, I just take a simple example, sidewall panels, in the interiors of the train, are not easily reusable per se inside the train, but maybe can be reused in the infrastructure to create a new type of sleepers or things like that. And the same would be applicable for tires and any other electronic products and so forth. But we need to have the right tools and the right methodology to apply that. So this is what we're going to investigate in Europe's rail, and I'm pretty sure that this type of solution could be applied across mode, and I encourage very much this cooperation.
Excellent. That's great to hear about the need for also that, I think, cooperation between different types of modes, between different types of industries and outside the transport sector as well. It was touched on it before that to get this potential to actually be deployed, policies and regulations are likely to be key. Rana, turning to you, what role do you see for policy? How necessary is it to help accelerate circularity within the transport sector?
I think circularity per se, decarbonization per se, policy and regulation is key. It's obviously clear that there's also something that is part of broader ecosystems, but the rules, and these can be incentives, these can be fiscal rules, it can be certain mandates, etc., are fundamental. So building in those principles into regulation is very important. I think what is the first thing that needs to happen so that the other market players also align is that there is very clearly a strong vision, and we heard it before, in an integrated approach also, which means like very often cross silos, across different ministries to align on principles of circular economy, on decarbonization, of sustainability. And of, so as a renewable player, moving away from fossil fuel to renewables. And I think this is one of the big challenges which we still observe, that in the policy and regulator frameworks, there is not always an alignment. So there might be like at the global principle an agreement, ESG standards exist, and there are agreements on what it means in terms of material use, etc., for instance. However, when we come down to to defining sectoral objectives, the implementation, etc., here we'll observe a diversified interpretations or implementation that might not always allow to build on each other in a more strategic way. So I think this is clearly something, as soon as we're speaking about more holistic changes which we're driving, they are fundamental. I think policy and regulation are key, but policy and regulation are also key. Here we're speaking about sustainability, and the transformations we're talking about is not only supply chains, but yesterday a lady from the African Union, I think, Commission, said that infrastructure projects are social projects. And I think that's another component which governments clearly need to ensure. We need to ensure the acceptance of those transitions from market players, but also from citizens. And they are fundamental, basically, and key decision makers, because if they don't adopt those, they're not going to use rail. They will continue to use the car. They will push back on the not in my backyard because there are wind generators, etc., if we don't really build on this. And I think this is something where the circular economy, I would say, on the policy and regulatory frameworks also mean that the national government need to work together in a much more strategic way with the subnational governments to really have a territorial strategy and implement the circular economy and the economic benefits of it also there in terms of job creation, in terms of resource use and reutilization, but also with the cities. Because they are close to citizens. And I think this vertical or multi-level governance is not always, or can globally probably be improved.
Thank you very much. Anna, before you were mentioning that biofuels are seen by Shell as being one significant way of reducing fossil fuel use. Would you be able to go a bit more into, I guess, the circularity of biofuels and then the policies that are necessary to get biofuels to scale?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, let me start from bridging and saying that actually the first route to the decarbonization is using renewable power through wind and solar. But there are certain sectors where you need energy density, long-haul flights, long transport through trucks and buses, shipping, where you need to still use fuel and burn fuel. Now, the way to try to reduce the carbon is then to look at how the fuel is produced, and instead of pretty much taking the oil from the ground or the carbon from the ground and then burning it, you actually look at carbon that has been locked on the ground, like in the form of waste, of residues, or locked through nature, through crops, plants, and then you use this as part of the process of producing the fuel. So when you then do the analysis end to end, then you find that you have less carbon being emitted, and depending on the process that you're using, that reduction can be significant, between 50 to 80%. So just wanted to put this in context on the circularity element of the biofuels. Now, it's also fair to say that we've seen biofuels in the last 10 years and the use of biofuels increasing by 5%. If we need to get to the Paris Agreement timing, we need to see biofuels increasing by 14% year on year between now and 2030. So there is more to be done. Policy come into place in a number of ways here, and to a certain extent, scaling biofuels, scaling sustainable aviation fuels, scaling hydrogen, all forms of alternatives, low carbon solutions, the recipe is very similar. You need to incentivize supply and you need to incentivize demand. When you're looking at policy, having certainty of policies over a long period of time matters. Because these are long-term investments. If you need to build a new plane or a new ship or a truck or a train, these are 30 to 40 years investments. So certainty of the policy matters. And then there are standard things that have worked for the scaling of the solar and wind industries, like contract for difference, tax breaks, feed-in contracts. So there are some standard mechanisms to make sure that supply and demand come together in an economic way. And last but not least, a little bit of flexibility around. I always tend to say that you want to make progress versus perfection. making sure that when you're looking at biofuels, you're looking at a broad range of flexible products that you can use to produce the biofuels, and then they are accounted for in the use of transport in diesel, sustainable aviation fuels, or in the case of shipping, can be bio-LNG or hydrogen in the future.
In your view, policy is particularly important to help scale that up. Are you already seeing that happening around the world? Are there already initiatives that's taking hold? Yeah, so we see that when there are common recipes for success, renewable power and coming from solar panels, we've seen costs coming down by 80% in the last 10 years. Because of policy being in place and making sure that these policies are sustainable over time. So the recipe for success seems to be the same, and making sure they are consistent. And there are, if I look at the aviation industry, for example, it's a global business. So you need to make sure that you have a level playing field. And I don't know if every country in Europe has a slightly different policy is not going to help. And making sure that you have whatever it is, stick or carrot, mandates, maybe in a European context, and in a US context is more the carrot with IRA. But again, providing that certainty to the industry of the direction of travel. Excellent. And sorry, Rana?
Yeah, just one short comment, because so we found this very astonishing. Now, admittedly, this is like on the biofuel mandates in road transportation. We have seen that from 70 countries that have a biofuel mandate on road transportation, in response to the inflation and the energy crisis, 10 have basically stepped down from those mandates. And I think this is something which is echoing very much what you're saying. This certainty of policies and the direction in which we are going is fundamental also in an energy crisis moment, especially when we see that, on the other hand, $1 trillion went into fossil fuel subsidies. So I think this is something where the governments really need to stick to the road, to their pathway, because it is allowing investors to invest in the infrastructure and 30 years of equipment. So
we're seeing, I guess, an increase in policy ambition on the fuel side. Is that also true, say, within specific modes and improving mode shift within the rail sector? Is policy sufficient at the moment to help stimulate rail enough, or is more needed?
Well, I think that to apply policies, we need to understand the context in which we are discussing. And I have the feeling, I'm not an expert on the field, so if I say something wrong, please correct me. But that there is no clear understanding, especially cross modes, of how to quantify, the impact of a circular economy. So I think the first step that we need to take in order to embrace any good policy is to start to work on this, and maybe to handle it from more the technical side and going towards more the standardization. So, for example, in the rail sector, starting to, have a common definitions of the different materials and the different case use in the rail sectors, categorize that, and being able later on to develop some key performance indicator and some real data that come out of it. And then this data needs to be comparable with the rest that is done in other transport sector. And then maybe policies can be applied using circular economy, maybe also to favorize a model shift, but it's a model shift towards what is more sustainable. So at the end, it's not a model shift necessarily through rail, but it's a model shift where it makes sense. So can we, for example, interiorize external cost that arrives in the different transport modes, which also includes data coming from analysis from circular economy. But again, these analyses must be comparable across mode. So I think really the first step for us will be to tackle this, at least to have sufficiently clear, standardized information coming from the rail sector, so that at least within the rail sector we can already start to regulate, because well, you probably know, and if you don't, I will tell you, that the rail sector is one of the transport modes that is the most regulated and the most standardized as well, but is working. So at the end is also the most safe transport modes thanks to that. And well, there are advantages and disadvantages. But this is the framework under which we operate. So we are very much favoring this type of standardization and regulation. There is always a trade not to overdo too much regulation, because it will also, by the way, kill sometimes the innovation. But the, let's say, advantage of the setup that we have created in Europe's rail is that we have the policymaker part of this joint undertaking. So actually we're there also to challenge the status quo, to challenge the existing standards and regulation. And once we prove that there is a need of change, we have the direct leverage with the European Commission in this case, and the European Union Agency for Railway to directly change, EN standards or regulations.
Jean-Baptiste, you were mentioning before that, as definitely within Valeo, there's already quite a lot of embedded circularity thinking. Is that because there were already policies that sort of forced it, and that there are already ways of quantifying circularity within the automotive sector? Or, I guess, how did that come about? And then, I guess, second question is then, what more is necessary?
Actually, no, that started because the market was there. It's purely driven by the fact that since 30 years, we have a market for remanufacturing. We have people that are ready to pay for those parts, which are actually 20 to 30% cheaper than new parts. So, but it's a very limited and not confidential, but limited market. So even if we're putting 1 million parts on the market every year, this represents for Valeo less than 1% of the total sales of our company. So, and we're addressing people that are repairing their cars and that's most of the time don't have the money to afford for new parts. So it's, I would say, a market which is limited today, but it's also limited because the way the market is structured, and I'm here talking about Europe specifically, we're not in what are the objectives of the European Union to build a single market. So today, for example, if you want to ship parts that we call cores, so parts that are with default and that you want to repair or to manufacture, if you want to cross-border, if you have trucks that want to cross the borders within Europe with those parts, it's only possible under very complex specific conditions. So we don't have a single market for just collecting the waste at European level, which means that the way you will operate that business is very nationally driven, which is today not sustainable from a financial perspective and point of view. If you want to ramp up and to accelerate there, you need to say that the level playing field, the market you want to address is Europe. You need to be able to collect parts at European level to treat them in a few industrial places, because you don't want to replicate thousands of places where you repair that, because you're losing in quality as well if you do that. So you want to have a few places where you do that, and then you want to be able to reship those parts that are remanufactured or repaired in the different European countries. So that's for me really the key thing. Today in Europe, we're not in a single market for that collection of parts and shipping of parts, and that's really the first hurdle that we need to lift. The second thing is that we don't have a unified definition of what is a waste, actually. That is related also to the fact, let's be very frank and honest, and sorry if we have people from the waste industry in the room, but over the past years, and we have many examples in many countries where we had landfills where it was illegal burying of waste and such of stories in Europe. So indeed, the regulator, and I fully understand that, is very reluctant or slowing down a little bit the process of saying, well, we want to unify that and we want to harmonize that, because it could create the risk of having people making wrong things with the waste. But we need to unify the definition of waste, because today, when something is a waste, you have legally binding rules that are related to that, and you cannot do anything with that, and it's also difficult to repair them and to remanufacture them. There are lots of authorization and stuff like that to do. We are pledging for trying to a little bit reviewing the definition of waste and saying if a waste is then intended to be repaired, remanufactured, have a second life, to make it simple, you should a little bit lift those regulations and those standards to allow people to indeed do that and do that more easily. So today we have the waste directive, which is existing in Europe, which was not revised over 20 years. We're pledging for reopening the discussion on that topic. Then, for me, the third point there as well is that today in Europe we have a kind of priority which is given to materials recovery. Everything is related to materials. If you have an old part, you're just dismantling the part and you're taking the steel, the aluminum, the copper separately, and then you're shipping it to traders and you're just reselling the materials for materials. But I mean, you have a part, you can repair it. And we should give priority to that because that's the really core of circularity. I mean, it's much more effective in terms of carbon, in terms of environmental impact, and even from a financial perspective to repair a part. But for that, you need to have what we call the urban mine, which is available. The fact that you have the reservoir of those parts available. And if you look at today, the way the end-of-life system in Europe for vehicles is organized, you have only 5 to 10 parts by car, which are from an old car, which are taken to be repaired or remanufactured. The rest is only valorized as materials, which means that there is a huge potential to go to 20, 50, 100, 150, 200 parts that can be repaired. And for that, we need to change the way the regulation is existing. There is one regulation on the table, which is under revision today at European level, which is the end-of-life directive. And in that directive, everything is related to valorization by mass of the vehicle, which push it for materials valorization. We are pledging for saying we have critical parts in the vehicle, batteries, electric motors, electronics, all that could be just taken out of the car and repaired per se. And this shouldn't flow via materials recycling. This can be taken for that because it's critical, because it's more effective to repair that. And the regulation should push for that. So that's as well important for me. And a final point, and I want to touch it also in the final topic that you have put on the table, which is innovation. But for me, final point is traceability. End-to-end traceability. If you want to repair a part, you need to know the history of that part. Because, as you know, we have been in the industry using 20 years ago materials that today, or substances that today are not allowed anymore. This is related to the REACH regulation and all the hazardous substances regulation that we have. But if you want to repair that part, you need to know what is in there. And that's not always obvious. That's something you don't know. And maybe also to precise it, because for people in the room, it's maybe not obvious. When we do remanufacturing or when we repair a part, we're not just repairing the old parts of my company, we're doing a diagnostic business. So we're taking all the same parts of our competitors plus ours, we're collecting them and we're repairing them or remanufacturing them. But I mean, we're just not living on the fact that we will repair our own parts, otherwise the business won't fly. So you need to have harmonized standards that are applying transversely to the whole sector. And it's not because we have at Valeo the commitment of saying our parts will be easily dismantleable because we have eco-design that everyone is doing that, to be very honest. So we should have a minimum standard of what is eco-design, what is dismantling, what is traceability, or what is the battery passport that you have, the product passport that you have, sorry. And this should be pushed by regulation. Then the market will work and the business player will make the business happen. But we need to have those basic principles which will create what I call the level playing field, but basically it's creating that single market for circularity, if you were to say it like that. And for me, these are really the key pillars for our sector today. And then we will be able to accelerate because we will have the right place to play in Europe. And you have similar debates out of Europe. So just to conclude on that, in the US, for example, or in Asia, but there as well, I would say the notion of really having the reservoir of piece to collect and to repair is as well the similar problem. So everything starts with that. If you want to have it, you need to collect parts and you need to have a regulatory framework pushing for that. And I stop here, sorry.
No problem at all. Is this, I guess, is something common that Michelin feels as well, or are there additional points?
Yes, so first to elaborate, yes, we have this completely in common, this question of what is waste, and is a worn tire waste or is it a product? And when you talk about retreading, it's putting rubber back on the tire and you can multiply its life by 4. Do you put additional rubber on a tire? Do you repair a product, or are you changing waste into a new product? And I completely agree. The regulations are not clear, which creates a complete mess and no level playing field in the industry. So that's really very, very important, and I totally agree. Now, if we go back to the principles of circular economy, if you look at avoid and reduce, the regulation can be extremely helpful to fight against program obsolescence, to ensure that products are long-lasting. But, and we touched upon it a little bit earlier, it's not because it's long-lasting that when it's older, the performances are lower. And it's where there's an issue. It's very easy to build a product when it's new, which is at the top, but after 2 years or 3 years, or for a tire, after 40,000 kilometers or 50,000 kilometers, there's a risk there. And for that, the regulatory bodies can be very helpful. For instance, we've been working with the European Commission to have a test on worn tires, because today there's a labeling of tires, but on tires new. But you can have the performance decrease immediately, be it noise, traction, etc., just after a few kilometers. So we are pushing to ensure that the tires are also tested worn, to ensure a stability of performance. If you ensure the stability of performance, then you ensure that the product can be used until the end, and then you use less material and you avoid producing new tires. Second area is around what I talked about earlier, is the closed loop and open loop. The regulators, because closed loop is easy to understand, and it's very seducing, it's nice, and we see today that regulation in the world tend to go in the direction of closed loop, assuming that closed loop is better. And it's not true. It's not always true. If you do a life cycle analysis, there are cases where a closed loop, to rip 100% of the product into the product is going to be worse than using this to do something else. I'm going to give you an example which is a little bit controversial, but it enables to understand. Today, a lot of our worn tires go into the cement industry because they need calories. And for them, in a tire, you've got a lot of calories, so they are very happy to burn the tire. And because they burn the tire, they don't use coal or they don't use something else. Okay, so from their perspective, it's a very interesting way of using it, and for the cement industry, it saves a lot of CO2. From a Michelin perspective or a tire industry perspective, if you do the life cycle analysis for us, it's not the best way to use the tire. And so there's always this question, when you talk about the best way, you look at it from which perspective? Worldwide, global, or me as a company that wants to claim it's zero CO2, or from, and this question of perimeter is going to be extremely important, and the legislator can play a role defining, is it cradle to grave? What does grave mean? How far are you responsible for your product? So this would be the 3 areas. So long-lasting performance, waste and product, what is waste, what is product, and also closed loop, open loop, and what is the best use of a product when it's worn.
So I guess definitely policy is necessary, I guess, to frame what is considered circular economy.
Yes.
Also then, before then, helping to promote
yes,
it.
and also what Rana said, it needs to be, regulations need to be long-lasting.
Yeah.
Because we'll talk about innovation. An innovation in our industry, it's 10 years. So if in 10 years you completely change the regulation, then when your product is ready to arrive at the market, it's obsolete, you cannot do anything. So how do we work hand in hand to ensure that regulations drive innovation, but are also stable enough in order that innovation can come to the market?
On that point, I guess we're living in a dynamic environment in which there's always new innovations, always new technologies that potentially change, offer opportunities, I guess, to be more circular in the transport sector, but potentially risks, I don't know. Rana, what do you see as then the role of technology in promoting a more circular transport sector as well?
think there are two ways to look at it. I'll use data from the energy side because this is the data I have more present. But according to the International Energy Agency, 50% of the global CO2 emissions can be abated with existing solutions. And I think that is something which is really important to remind ourselves because there is such a disruption happening and such a pressure, we still hope collectively, I guess, and especially government, for the silver bullet, which is going to solve everything. And I think we don't have the time to wait anymore. So what needs to happen first is to see, like, what are the solutions where we already know they're good in terms of circular economy, in terms of carbon footprints, etc., and implement them, create the right policy and regulatory frameworks, and the right price signals to ensure that they are being implemented in an accelerated way. Because we're far away from just building on those 50% of solutions that already exist. This said, obviously, we also need innovation. And when we're speaking, so I think on road transportation, probably 80% will be electrified. So I'm saying 80%, but there's very clearly a trend that is foreseeable. You see, like, but when we're looking for shipping and aviation, here we are in situations where more innovation is required, and it also means that basically from the government side, the research and development and the cross-sectoral and cross-player strategies need to clearly be in the focus here. And then I also think we had like lots of succession more looking at OECD countries too. I think there is a distinction to also have in two ways. What are infrastructures, equipments, and solutions that are already in place? And where do we need to build new infrastructure, equipment, solution, and energy services? Because the strategies here and the level of innovation required also is different. And here I would say, like, when we're looking into the existing equipments, when we're looking into developing countries where actually the reuse of material is just happening and happening all the time, but in an informal sector, it is really important to think about, because there is not the same economic capacities to make those shifts happen, which innovations exist in terms of, for instance, retrofitting and using what is in place, but ensuring that the carbon footprint, the waste footprint, etc., is being reduced. So I would say, like, there are some transport sectors where more innovation is required. There are some regions where more innovations, or economies, I'd say, where more innovation is required because they don't have the possibility to build up everything new.
Sure. I guess then also, can then technologies also help in, it was mentioned before, the importance also of, say, I guess, traceability and things, and perhaps other digital technologies. Anna, do you see a role for digital technologies that could help accelerate or unlock some of the benefits of circularity also within Shell?
Yeah, so absolutely. And this is one where my ex-job as head of aviation comes in quite nicely. The aviation industry, again, a very difficult one to decarbonize. Sustainable aviation fuels is seen as the main solution for decarbonization. The world has less than 1% of that, and is not easy to get. And the path is to decarbonization, to net zero, is a tricky one. So this is where every bit really helps. And I'll give you an example around, so sustainable aviation fuel can be produced through biofuels. We discussed this just before, earlier on. And what we have seen is that biofuels production is quite a different beast versus let me pull oil from the ground and I have a few fields where I can do that, versus let me go and collect waste from so many dispersed locations. And then transform it into a fuel, and then ship it, or ship it first and then transform it into a fuel. So the example I can give is what we have done in the aviation business with a tool called Avilia. What does this tool do? We kind of tag feedstock. We go back and look at, okay, can we trace the feedstock, and can we make sure that we understand and account for the carbon avoided through blockchain technology. And then we say, okay, let's forget about where the fuel is sold and where the fuel is paid for. So you could, for example, say, I talked to an airline and I fueled their plane with sustainable aviation fuel in Europe, but the airline sits in the US and takes the carbon credits somewhere else. This also helps me with avoiding shipping and wasting CO2 along the way. And the airlines may decide that they also want to share the cost of the carbon credits with somebody else and to bridge the commercial difficulties of a fuel that may be more expensive at the start. So I think technology, in this case blockchain, is helping us to bring more opportunities for our customers in a way which is completely innovative and taking away also some of the waste in transport in between the different ways of bringing stuff to the airlines.
I don't know, Nicolas or Jean-Baptiste, is this also, I guess, using maybe blockchain or any digital technologies, is that also something within your businesses that is being used for this?
Yes, for the tire industry now, we've got RFIDs in each tire.
Okay.
So it means they can be tracked and managed. So the technology is in the tire. Now the devices to exploit the technology is still not everywhere, but it's step one.
Okay.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. And we believe in that. And we want to accelerate. And this is very much related to the notion of traceability, end-to-end traceability. And what we have created in the automotive industry 2 years ago is something called Catena-X. This was created originally by the German OEMs and the German ecosystem. This is now expanding worldwide. And it's a data space, actually, where the objective is to be agnostic. So we're not, agnostic in terms of technology, so blockchain or another technology to secure the data transfer, and agnostic in terms of solution used. So actually, everyone in the industry is using a different system to collect the data. So you're using SAP or whatever. And you want to use your system, and you want to continue to use the system. And if you ask everyone in the industry to use a unique system, you will have competition troubles, and this won't work. So, and by the past, everyone was addressing the topic like that. So what we say in Catena-X, and I'm very well placed to say that because I'm a member of the board of Catena-X since a few weeks now, we think, let's do something agnostic. Let's do something like that where everyone will continue to use its own system, its own traceability system, but we ensure that the data set is harmonized and we ensure that the exchange of data is harmonized. So you will continue to use the system, but you will be able to connect different systems between them because you have created the right set of IT and IS standards. So that's what we started to do with Catena-X, and we're today expanding worldwide that ambition. And it's really unique because we are one of the only industry that has this ambition today of creating something like a data space. So it's not a platform. We're not connecting the data in one place. Everyone is going to use his own server and so on. It's just creating the framework and the boundary conditions where you will be able to exchange those data. And for me, this is really the promise of being able to create end-to-end traceability, which is absolutely key, as I said before, if you want to do circular economy, because you need to have a product passport. You need to know where the part was produced, what is the bill of materials, and where the parts are. So if you want, as well as you have been explaining in the aviation industry, sometimes you don't need to ship products around the world to do something. So, and for that you need to have the data, but you need to have the secured amount of data to do so. So that's really what we want to achieve with Catena-X. And then each individual player will be able to develop its own use case based on this harmonized data set. So for us, it's really key. And well, it's really the first time also there is a kind of global consortium alliance between the sector, between different players to do so. And we have embarked people like T-Systems or SAP or Siemens, which are providing the software behind. So it's really a huge momentum there to create that data traceability. So that's really one thing for me in terms of innovation. And
that's very interesting. Well, and just jumping then also then to Giorgio of, are there then, I guess, new technologies as part of your work on the EU rail joint undertaking? I guess there's lots of new research things as well that can help getting more people into trains, but also improve circularity within the rail sector as well.
Yes, and if, well, maybe take first the circularity aspect. We are also looking, as Jean-Baptiste said, in the automotive sector to create a diagnostic way in order to exchange data. And this will be very interesting because we are starting it, and later on there is a need of exchanges. So if other transport sector also already have this, will be very much helpful in doing so. I think we're living in a world where, we're really seeing the value of data, that is not data is gold, but the use of shared data will become gold if we're able to make it right. And also, it's about, as I mentioned before, development of IT tool and automation tool that will help us to make the right decision. And I think also here where automation, artificial intelligence, algorithms, and all of that will play a significant role because, as was said before by Nicolas, it depends the point of view. And I don't think it's only a matter of the regulators to make sure that this point of view is defined, but also the sector itself can identify through these maybe more automated tools, on the different point of view, what is the optimum life cycle cost, what is the impact of this solution, and what is the impact of that. And coming back to the solutions we are investigating for the circular economy, to me the idea is that we're looking also to specific product solutions that will be better suited for the circular economy, and to look that more in an holistic approach, meaning since we're doing innovation in several other areas, for example, we're looking also at how to handle, resilience to climate change, how to handle, lower energy consumption as well, even if it's already electrified, and so on and so forth. So maybe there is value in putting all of that together and looking it really at an holistic approach. And then, of course, I think, coming back to your question, what do we do also to make sure that, rail actually becomes attractive? And that responds to the mobility need. So what we want to have a rail as the core of a mobility transport system, but because, of course, you cannot, with train, go to point A to point B. So you need, by definition, multimodality. But we need to become much more flexible. We need to become much more attractive. And we need to, for doing that, use digital technologies to change the way how rail is operated. Just an example, traffic management. Today, you have a rail that is running and is controlled, how the trains are running at regional level, best case at national level. This doesn't work in a geographical context where we are, Europe, because if there is an incident on a rail, you will simply wait that this incident is repaired because it's an international train, instead of rerouting it, because the systems are not connected. So, for example, we are connecting the systems for this. And then the other, I would say, innovation that is key in order to bring the attractiveness there is to involve the user, and maybe also with the circular economy, because we can see more and more users that are saying we want to take the train, for example, even if it takes us a little bit longer, because we can see the advantage of CO2 emission, we can see the advantage of that, but we need to quantify, we need to have the passport included also on a circular economy perspective, because I think maybe also the user will be interested to know about this data on circular economy.
Thank you very much. We now are drawing towards the end of the panel, but we probably have around 10 minutes if there are any questions from the audience. If you'd like to ask a question, please put your hand up and we'll get you a microphone. And if I could ask also if you could please introduce yourself, just so we know also who is speaking as well. If anyone would like to ask a question, if not, I will jump in with one already. We're talking about different types of technologies also and I guess how they can help shift us to more sustainable ways, reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Anna, you're speaking quite a lot about biofuels, but then I guess you're talking about the potential of scaling up SAF. But can you also elaborate on the potential of any other novel fuels? Potentially, there may be some limitations in SAF. Are there any other types of things that needs to then be scaled up? And is there an opportunity to make sure that that is circular and reducing fossil fuel use as well?
Yeah, thank you. And so first of all, I would say all tools needs to be used here when it comes to decarbonization, and not a single solution is the silver bullet. So SAF comes to play in the aviation business, and later on, potentially hydrogen. So let me maybe talk about a little bit about hydrogen in this case. And hydrogen can be used in many ways, linked to transport. It can be used as a way to produce sustainable aviation fuels in power to liquids. It can be used as a fuel itself, either in planes or trucks, or maybe ships at some point. But although I would say for trucks easier than ships and planes, because you need a completely redesign of your network there. Or it can be used as a way to store electricity, renewable generation, if the grid is not able to help you. Now, unsurprisingly, however, the amount of blue or green hydrogen, so lower carbon hydrogen, is quite small. The industry currently uses 99 millions of grey hydrogen, and in 2022, I think less than 1% was blue and green, so very, very small. And the way to scale is not different from what you've seen with SAF. You need to have incentives, you need to have the right policies, you need to bring the cost down, the cost curve down to allow for supply and demand to come together. And there is some technology innovation. Now, companies like Shell also look at how can I bring hydrogen and a little bit de-risk all of the difficulties that I find along the way, technology, supply and demand, costs. We have announced last year construction of a 200 megawatt electrolyzer facility in the Netherlands. This is 2/3 of the total electrolyzer capacity in the world. So that tells you how little there is today and how much more needs to be done going forward. And for example, in this particular case, we are the first user for the hydrogen, because we use it in our refining close by. Now, is that going to be the end game? Possibly not. Eventually, we would want to use the hydrogen for, I don't know, transport, commercial road transport, trucks or planes. But to get us there, we kind of need to step in and a little bit help the journey. And I also have to say that these are expensive investments, and we can make a few within a company, but we need all the others to come. So the hope here, for example, in the Netherlands, is to have many, many hydrogen plants built next to each other. Then it becomes a hydrogen hub. Then from hubs, you're starting to get regional clusters. And hopefully one day we'll have a hydrogen economy at the global scale. But there is quite a bit more to be done.
Thank you for that. I saw there was one question in the middle table there. I think a microphone is coming to you.
Thank you very much. And excellent discussion, and thank all the speakers and the moderator for that. My name is Joanne Vincentin. I'm with UNICEF HQ in New York, and I'm the focal point for child injury prevention, which includes injury and road safety. My question is that we've heard a lot about all the wonderful work that's being done in circular economy, but it's been focusing a lot of the examples on high-income countries. And my question specifically is, how do we take all of the successes and the innovation that you're talking about, and what are the greatest challenges that we have to look at taking the lessons learned and being able to apply it to low and middle income countries so we can accelerate what we want to gain in circular economy faster in those locations? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I agree, we've probably focused a lot on lots of the digital sides, but are there, going to come in on this?
I would even say the other way around. We have lots of things to learn from them, actually, because they're repairing cars motorcycles, bicycles since years because they cannot afford buying new ones. And they have created crazy and incredible innovative solution with limited resources, limited technical tooling and materials to repair and to upskill their products and their vehicles. So I think we have lots of things to learn. And at Valeo, for example, we have supported some startup and innovation challenge in some African countries, and it's really incredible how they're able to propose a kind of similar Uber system with just same phone where people are just sending SMS or text messages, or even how in terms of proposing alternative solution of repairing some parts with limited resources, they have created solutions. So I think we have things to learn there. Then the question that you're raising is the question of what is the quality or the standard that you want to achieve. And obviously we have higher standards in terms of expectation given to the product. So this is something different, but this is given to the local and to the regional place where we are. So I think in terms of innovation, we have to learn there and from them. And this is really, for me, interesting to witness.
Nikolai, you wanted to touch on
Yes,
this?
just to elaborate, for instance, India are one of the worldwide champions of circular economy. They've been doing it for forever, and I wanted to insist that circular economy, if you want to combine it with zero CO2 and life cycle assessment, needs to be local, and that's why it's important to understand the reality of the region, because if you're able to recycle something but you need to travel 300 miles or 3,000 miles to have it used, it's useless. So it's local. You need to learn from what people know how to do, strengthen their strength, and perhaps help leapfrog a few things. But it's really a domain where low and middle income countries are in many cases more advanced than us, because they are still living with the nature cycles, whereas in the West, we decided that we would go straight forward, trying to forget that everything is a cycle.
Rana, very quickly, and then that's another question then in the audience.
Very quickly to bring in two aspects. Also the one to bring in the energy part. We really see that the waste part, the transport part, and the energy part is really something where there is a massive opportunity. And for instance, many of those countries do not yet have a centralized electric grid or infrastructure, but are rather building on local mini-grids and directly generating income for, taxi drivers, Ubers, etc., by using renewable energy too in electric 2 or 3-wheelers. So, and they are developing the retrofitting solutions for their 2 and 3-wheelers. So I think there's really something that is important. I would like to add two aspects. Unfortunately, because when we're going back 50, 60, 70 years old, my grandparents were still keeping the papers and reusing it 20 times, etc. So there was such a practice. I think that with the communication and with the fact that the globalization and the growth and what we're still collectively thriving for is also communicated into those countries, I think there is a big work we collectively need to do as a society, is to highlight how great those examples are happening in these developing countries, and not only doing this in a patronizing way, but really putting this and bringing those voices and experiences to the global fora, so that the global fora is shaped by this. So I think this is one very important part to also do.
Thank you for that. There's a question here on this last table for the gentleman.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Fujisaki from Japan Transport and Tourism Research Institute. And I understand that Catenax project is mainly undertaken in the automotive industry, and the logistics industry is not much involved in that project. But do you have anything that is expected to responded by also logistics industry?
I think that's a question for you, Jean-Philippe, about the Catenax system. I didn't quite catch then the final point. Sorry, the microphone's not on. Do we turn the microphone?
What are you expect to be responded by logistics industry. From your point of view, from the ongoing experience of Catenax.
The question is, are we going to expand out of Europe?
Sorry, the microphones. I think yes.
Okay. Yes, indeed, we are going to expand out of Europe, and we have an internationalization strategy. We opened the first talks actually with Japan, with JAMA and the Automotive Association there, and but the idea is to embark people out of just the usual suspects of the automotive industry. So because the principle is to embark the full supply chain. So indeed, yes, we're willing to grow there, and we have open talks in Japan, in the US, in China as well. So well, yes, the answer is yes.
So it's moving outside of the region, but also into different industries, more outside of the automotive.
No, I mean the core. It's still supposed to serve the needs of the automotive industry, but we are willing to address the different industries that are helping us to build our products. So the idea is indeed to have the steel industry contributing, or the material suppliers contributing, or the recycling industry being part of it, and so on and so forth. But well, no, it's not supposed to be expanded, for example, to the aviation sector so far.
Okay.
I mean, maybe in the near future, I don't know, but so far the core focus is still automotive.
Excellent, thank you. Unless there are any other questions, which I don't think so. Our time is now drawing to a close. So I hope you found the discussions today as interesting and enlightening as definitely I did. I think we can definitely all agree that there is a significant untapped potential for the transport sector to become more circular. There's a lot of potential there. Part of that, I guess, is about standardizing, creating some of the policy frameworks that can help define what is circularity and then help to promote it a lot as well. We heard also a lot about the need for collaboration both between industries, touching both also at a local level, a national level, and also between regions. So I think there's already lots of food for thoughts there as well. I'd like you, if you could, also to help join me in thanking our excellent panelists for their interventions today. I think it's been really insightful, so thank you. Perfect.